Hey everybody, it's Scott Stevens here as we hit the top of the hour, 5 o'clock Mountain Time, which was typically when I would do my first live at when I had the 5, 6, and 10 day job. So 5 o'clock's just kind of par for the course out here. Well, we've had an interesting week weather-wise. We've had two tropical storms, Douglas and Hannah. Looks like we've got another one in the process of kind of gathering some steam. We'll see in the next 24 hours whether it actually gets christened. My bet is, and indications are right now that it will, since the NHC has now begun comments and watches on tropical depression number 9. Isaias would be the name if it is so. It is deemed name worthy at this particular point. It becomes a tropical storm. Otherwise, if we head over to Australia, kind of check in for their weekend, as they had kind of a crazy weekend with a storm hitting off the coast of New South Wales with as much as 8 to 10 inches worth of rainfall, a little bit more in some other spots. Watch some of the severe weather that occurred during the last 3 days in eastern New South Wales. Now, this is tweets by @WeatherZone. You could go follow him. He does a great, maybe 2 minute weathercast specific to Australia, New Zealand, and so he's always does a good job, and it's quick and easy to watch that. The dynamic low pressure sweeping through eastern New South Wales brought more than 350 millimeters of rain, waves near 11 meters, so 34, 35 feet for English folk, and then winds gusting as high as 170 kilometers per hour, which is not quite 70 miles per hour. That is intense enough. Flooding and coastal erosion has hit parts of eastern New South Wales during the last few days. Remember, they started their winter on the wet side, then it turned dry through May and June, and maybe now in July we're going to get some of that water again before they head on into their summer season. All right, bit back home. Let's just come on right over here. And here's some of the other floods on the watchers dealing with the flooding that happened in New South Wales, where power interruptions impacted about 15,000 properties. So that's not a small thing. And then Hannah moving through that very, very rough terrain in northeastern Mexico, where they've got some peaks, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, or 12,000 feet. And you deal with that kind of water forced up those sheer slopes, and you're bound to get a lot of water. All right, as we begin to pass the apex or the peak of the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, solar summer will run from 5 May until 5 August. Those would be the 3 months where the Northern Hemisphere gets the most amount of sunlight. So next week, towards the end of next week, we're coming up on 5 August. So that means that the 3 sunniest months of the year are now behind us, and that will begin to reflect in the height of the sun above the horizon over the course of the day. So the reason I'm showing this image is the visible image of North America and the Northern Pacific, and we can see how brief the daylight is up, or the nighttime is up north. At night is just barely nighttime as you get into northern Alaska, as the sun will set very shortly, and then that terminator will begin to slip farther south at an ever accelerating pace as we send solar summer back into the history books. So just a little note. And for me, I think there'll come a time when we realign the seasons more with what the sun is doing rather than with what our calendar is, so that the end of summer would be the 5th of August, and that would be the beginning of autumn. And in those northern latitudes, this is absolutely the case, where we begin to see some of those deciduous trees throwing up some yellow leaves. That happens in the 1st of August, and that would truly be the heralding arrival of the beginning of the fall season. So I think in time, that also means that winter would begin the 5th of November, and then spring would begin the 5th of February, which is more in line with the sun. All right, kind of odd and semi out of topic, but not necessarily always, that there have been a lot of packets of unusual seeds showing up from China, just kind of sent randomly to people who didn't buy anything, didn't request anything, and these packages are just showing up in American post office boxes, and then the customers go open it up like, I didn't order anything, but they're seeds, and they're always unidentified. So they're just saying, let your local department deal with that, so we don't end up planting something that could be of questionable goods for us. All right, a barge requisitioned to help rescue people stranded by the floods crashes into bridges that is then ripped to pieces. Some people can be seen on deck, and it's unclear whether they're rescue deckhands or civilians. And the Chinese floods continue on as those rivers running at peak depth or peak height. And there was a story, and we'll get to that in a moment, about the water speed coming out of the bottom of the Three Gorges Dam is approaching 60 plus miles an hour. So just incredible velocity as the water is then pushed downstream, and you just don't want to get in the way. This is Hong Kong, the $3.8 billion underground drainage network to prevent flooding. Look at that cavernous. It's truly like a movie set. Just that kind of a big cavern that has to deal and contend with the quantity, the volume of water that area has the potential to receive, and then they've got to deal with it. All right, breaking from NHC in the Atlantic section has released its first advisory cone for the potential tropical cyclone 9. Isaias would be the name, and that puts Puerto Rico sometime late Thursday, potentially, well, let's just say during the day Thursday, for a close call with Isaias. And I was there last year where it was Isaac was the named storm, and it ended up not being such a big thing. And these are kind of the random tracks from the different 9 global models. Almost all of them take it at or just north of Puerto Rico, at or north of the island of Hispaniola, and then recurving towards the north before it gets to Florida. Again, these are subject to change, as we all know and know so well. And we'll just have to watch this as we move on through the course of the week. All right, so where we are, yesterday we talked about. I should look over here to see who's in the chat box. Vicky, Donnie's there. Good to see you guys here, and Barbara. Risa. You've just completely turned me on Texas weather, I must admit. All right, back to the temperature forecast. Blue is where we've got below normal temperatures, and the orange to red above normal temperatures. This forecast will run about 2 weeks. So I'll just kind of put it in an animation. You might be able to catch the date that it's valid over here, but the big one is kind of the cool weather that pours into Australia. That still looks like it's going to happen around 3, 4, 5, 6 August, and then kind of reinforced with another surge about 4, 5, 6 days later. The central part of Canada, the upper Midwest, the United States, stays on the cool side. And honestly, so does a large part of Africa that has been very, very wet this spring. Also remaining cool is a bunch of Eastern Europe and continuing into portions of Asia. So that's just kind of a quick look at the global view. I want to pop into China again because of the flooding. Their biggest rainfalls look like they'll beat North Korea on that little boundary right there. I know there's a lot of color in here. Let's just scroll this all the way back so we can get kind of some land in there. Here's China. You see all that China, Korea here, Japan is here, and then we've got Iran, and then Africa through here with the Mediterranean. So what we're looking at is every 12 hours, we plot how much rain the models anticipate will fall on a particular area. I'm going to take it all the way to the end, and then the flooding zone has been in here, and it looks like it gets a bit of a reprieve. However, upstream, there's still 8 to 14 inches worth of rainfall. The big bullseye is just on that North Korea-China border, where the totals are upwards of 14, 15 inches. So that's a lot of water, and maybe there are zones that have not yet flooded that will be at risk of that kind of weather. All right, a little bit closer back stateside, the blue is where the heights or the jet stream is a little cooler than normal, and then we see some warmth towards this weekend, building in the western states into western Canada, trying to push up in that Arctic. It'll succeed for a little bit, and then it just cannot withstand the onslaught of the cool air coming in from the Pacific, and really kind of ending up with a moderate start to the month of August. And as we've kind of mentioned off the top, the cooler weather is not that far away. And you can have 80s and 90 degrees or even low 100s, and then once a thunderstorm shows up, boom, the temperature comes back. You get that Mother Nature's natural air conditioning. And we've seen a lot of rain in the last 2 days, southern Kansas, Oklahoma, and now into North Texas, also along the Texas coast and deep into southern Texas down in here. That rain is falling on top of the rainfall accumulated by Hannah. Yeah, Donnie, hopefully Puerto Rico will have an easy time with this particular one. I agree. That island does not need any more challenges. Risa, are you watching? I can't see you. I saw her name up there a little bit ago. Oh, yeah, way up at the top. This kind of year makes me feel sad because of the shorter days. That would always hit me about the second week of August when I would, being the astronomer in me, would be keenly aware of just how the light has changed. The midday or even afternoon, as you're getting off the school bus or getting ready to go to school, you just recognize that it's not the same. All right, finally, some cool air being pressed into New England, into Pennsylvania, all the way down into the Ohio River, and now beginning to press into Kentucky. So they're seeing some relief from the very hot conditions that have been in place since the weekend. Hot in the southwest, it's dry. There are a few thunderstorms down in that direction, but they're not as numerous as they were yesterday because they've been drawn northward into Idaho, into Wyoming, into Montana, where they're enjoying some of those good rains, and it's needed. It's just plain needed. This is a dry time of year, and the monsoon doesn't get as far north as maybe the Utah, northern Colorado line. So this extension into Idaho, Wyoming, Montana is certainly on the welcome side. Had a couple of nice blasts of storms right here between Dallas, Abilene, and Waco that sent out a cool front, an air mass change, and then they completely killed the other storms around there, which I thought was kind of unusual. It's right back in here, right here. It was like we had battling thunderstorms. You could see these boundaries right up, right there, and it just begins to progress out. And usually those are very potent thunderstorm manufacturers because it's essentially a cold front. It goes and lifts the hot, humid air, and up we go. And that really can happen during those nighttime hours. All right, temperatures 90s in Norfolk, Virginia, and at 102 off the coast of Northern California, 103 at Redding. But in between, we've got some relief with widespread 60s, even lower 60s in Wyoming from those rains. Instead of low 100s on the eastern Colorado plains and the high plains of Texas, we've got more like 70s and 80s. So there is a bit of a relief from that kind of excessive heat. For the next couple of days, today, this is kind of the frontal situation with the risk of severe weather in northern Wyoming, middle portion of Oklahoma. Tomorrow, that slides to the southeast or east, in depending on the others, which zone we're looking at, and then into the Ohio Valley. But still, widespread thunderstorms nearly from the front range of the Rockies to the East Coast, the exception being the West, where temperatures are going to be hot. Record highs today, again, before that air was pressed off out to sea. We had Providence at about 95 degrees, Wallops Island in Virginia at 96. Tomorrow, the heat begins to reshift out west with Baker and Burns, Oregon, 98 degrees both, with those record highs, one back in 1934, and the other far more recent to 2016. And then Thursday, the heat is on out west. Boise at 105, Elko at 103, El Paso 103, Flagstaff forecast to be 91, Kingman, Arizona 108, Phoenix at 115. That would tie a record set back in 1934. So some hot weather as we move into the weekend or towards the weekend, mostly focused in the Mountain West. So what do I want to do with this particular one? Let's see over here. What bizarre weather globally. Karen, I can't wait for fall. Fall, because when we begin to see what I believe is happening, and the indications are with this grand solar minimum, it's kind of spring and fall where that scenario really becomes apparent. Last winter or last fall, we had snows really early up in Alberta with I think it was about 14, 15 September. The snow fell, and then the rains were kind of regular after that. The farmers really struggled to get their crops in. So September and October are going to be really fascinating months for me. And so we'll see how crazy we can get 2020 before it's all said and done. Very humid here, and that's not so often the case in that Texas Panhandle, but 45% humidity with dew points. Like, I've got that map. I've got that image right in there. Dew points in the 60s. Yeah, that's ugly. Or 60, 64. That's enough. That's enough, Risa, to get you inside and like huddled around the air conditioner. All right, back to why I wanted to show this map. Puerto Rico is way down here, right here. Can you see that? So what I want to do is roll this forward, and we're looking at about the 18,000 foot level, halfway through the density part of the atmosphere. Not the full dimensional, but just where the bulk of the air rides below, between about the surface and 18,000 feet. Once you climb that high, 5.5 miles, you're halfway through the density of the atmosphere. So what we're looking at is the potential of this storm just kind of grazing Puerto Rico, and then it intensifies and goes across the Bahamas. Remember last year that they had the Bahamas dealt with that storm, that very potent storm. It started with a D, and I don't know why I can't remember it right now, but they were dealing with that storm. So this is kind of a replay, and I'm even seeing something right here, right down in here, right about 8 days away. It could be kind of curious to watch those little ripples. And because I'm on such a large scale, let's come out over here. I can't really zoom into the Atlantic any clearer the Puerto Rico very well on this particular map. It will certainly do that tomorrow as this event draws a little bit closer. But either way, within about 60 hours, Puerto Rico will be dealing with some rains. And this is why it's probably some good news, because they have been so very dry. Puerto Rico and a good eastern half of that island and the southern portion remaining dry, as there are tens, if not a few 100,000 folks that are in water rationing as we speak. So it's kind of important that they get a good rain. And if it comes with 30, 40 mile an hour winds, so be it. The rain is just necessary at this point of the game. All right, for the rest of the nation, kind of dry out west, almost nothing as we move through the next 15 days. The mountains of Mexico beginning to kind of pull it back as the monsoon's not beginning to progress so much farther to the north. It's kind of being drawn back into the more southerly locations, but the heaviest rains anticipated the southern Appalachians and then the mid-Ohio and mid-Mississippi River valleys. So that's kind of the extent of it. Let's see what you guys are chatting about over here. What inspiration have you got for us? Donnie saying it seems to be abnormally cool up here in the mountains. We need some hot days for the vegetables to come to fruition. It's true. At least we've gotten to about 80 degrees today. It's been 3 days since we've been to that point. That's high for here. That is high humidity. But the beauty part of that is that you can generate some thunderstorms, and they can come in as soon as that sun sets. They'll come in off those mountains to the west into Mexico, and then roll off to the east. 115. Yeah, Robin, I would melt. Those are places that I don't think are meant to be inhabited by humans, at least above ground. Below ground, that's a whole different story. And it's interesting. There's you go to the outback in Australia, and for some of the mining operations that are there, they go underground. That's where they dig out. They build their living conditions, so you just don't have to subject yourself and then your home to those kind of energy demands to keep your conditions tolerable. Water rationing in Puerto Rico, absolutely, Karen, and it's kind of crazy how many homes, how many apartment buildings, and it doesn't matter whether you're rural or in an urban situation, that they've all got cisterns on top of those buildings, and they keep them full, and they keep topping them off because you just never know when you're going to need that extra bit of water. Yes, they have been. Yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing about the summertime thunderstorms coming off into Mexico and then slowly marching east is all of a sudden, about midnight 30, clap or two of thunder, a little flash you see inside your bedroom, and then the rain begins. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. It's about where we are for the time of day, coming up on 18 minutes or so. And thanks for coming on in. And we will check out tomorrow to see if we get this storm named and a little better forecast. And hopefully those folks in Puerto Rico can deal with a little brush with some rain and some wind, and their infrastructure is in a condition to where they can handle a little tropical storm. All right, guys, have a great evening. And as always, hey, keep looking up.